Hello and welcome to Tales and Trails. I'm Minnie Menon. In the late 18th century, there was a queen who rose from the heart of India and made her mark. We don't talk enough about Ahilyabai Holkar, who was an astute leader and a visionary ruler. She also left an indelible mark across India, from Somnath in the west to Benares, from Badrinath in the north to Rameswaram in the south. Here's her story. These are the famous ghats of Maheshwar on the Narmada. Come here and you can't but get impressed by the queen who established this ghat and the city. Queen Ahilyabai's mark is everywhere. The daughter-in-law of the powerful Peshwa Subedar or General Malhar Rao Holkar, who was one of the key players in the spread of the Maratha Empire to the north, Ahilyabai was a woman far ahead of her times. Historian Sugandha Johar has spent years studying the queen who left such an indelible mark.
I was attracted to her from my childhood, mainly because she's such a powerful person. Even more so when I realized that in spite of the limitations of being a widow, what she achieved, the fact that even in that day and age, her character shone through so much that her father-in-law broke all social conventions to train her and stop her from becoming a sati.
Little is known of Ahilyabai's childhood. She was a daughter of a priest when Malhar Rao first met her. It is said that he was so impressed by her confidence that he asked her hand in marriage for his son and heir. However, in 1754, Ahilyabai's husband Khande Rao Holkar was killed in the Battle of Kumher, where he was fighting for the Mughals against the Jats. It seems that the Mughals were so afraid of incurring the wrath of Malhar Rao that they gave Ahilyabai a Jagir. Malhar Rao went on to train her to take over the reins of his kingdom.
She was given a Jagir of Ambad and Verul. Verul is where the famous Ellora temple is. And it's probably because of that one of her earliest temples are at Verul. And we also know that a number of the sculptures in Ellora were replastered by Ahilyabai.
A large part of Ahilyabai's success came from the wealth that the Holkars had managed to build up.
Malhar Rao Holkar was a very astute man. He knew that, Maratha Jagirs were mostly Saranjami Jagirs till then, which really meant that the Jagir was given on the precondition that they have X numbers of standing army in terms of so many cavalry, so much infantry. And if you did not continue, it could be confiscated. To ensure that his descendants had something and they didn't have to go back with a begging bowl to the sovereign, Malhar Rao requested that the Jagir be divided, whatever he was given to him, be divided into two parts. One for the Saranjam, to look after the army and for details, and the other called Khazgi, which should be given to his wife, which would then be inherited by the women of the family. It was never supposed to go to the men. Not the daughters, but the daughters-in-law. So, Ahilyabai only inherited what was Gautamabai's Jagir. The Saranjami Jagir actually first went to her son, Malhar Rao Holkar, who was mentally unstable. So, unfortunately, when he died within a few months, the Jagir went to Tukoji Rao Holkar, whom she advised the Peshwa to appoint as the chief of the Holkar army.
Ahilyabai was also politically astute. After her son's death, she got Tukoji Rao Holkar, one of the most trusted commanders of Malhar Rao, to manage the Holkar army out of Indore, while she managed the administration of the kingdom from Maheshwar, her new city built on her land. This is when Queen Ahilyabai really came into her own.
I'm amazed at the fact that none of our management institutes have even bothered to look at her management as a sort of a case study. We take case studies from all over the world, but here is this woman. I mean, when she started administrating, it was 1765. in the middle of nowhere. She was sitting there and she was taking care of all the administration, checking out, ensuring people were paying their bills. She was spending money all over. And when she realized that a lot of her, the fields around Maheshwar, where she had moved after her son's death, were lying fallow, she actually invited a number of agriculturists from Gujarat to come down and till those villages. Even today around Maheshwar, if you talk to a number of the agriculturists, tell you that their ancestors came because of Ahilyabai invited them, and they are pretty rich. They do a lot of hard work. Similarly, she also invited weavers from Mandu. Mandu, by that time, though once a very formidable fort, had lost its preeminence. So she invited weavers from Mandu, and she also invited some weavers from Chanderi, experimented with them, and created the famous Maheshwari fabric, which is still quite popular. And even in her lifetime, the Peshwas from Pune were ordering their dhotis from Maheshwar. And in addition to that, what is amazing is that she only used the surplus of each year's thing to build. Even at her death, she had a lot of money in her treasury. Her revenue had gone up by about 130% in the 30 years of her reign. And remember, this was without any conquest between 1765 and 1797.
Ahilyabai's mark can be seen far beyond Maheshwar. Take a boat down the Ganga in Benares and you will see the famous Manikarnika Ghat. Go up the stairs and walk further on and you will find the famous Kashi Vishwanath temple. Both were rebuilt by Ahilyabai. In fact, her mark can be seen all the way from Somnath in the west to Rameswaram in the south and Uttarkashi in the north.
We don't know exactly what led her building program. She first started with the Jyotirlingas. For example, the Somnath temple is not built on the ruins of the old Somnath temple. She's built that Somnath temple near the old temple. Even though we know that she has built in so many different places, we don't have a complete authentic list. I have been trying to compile a long list of it. I have stopped at 157 so far.
During the late 18th century, Ahilyabai may well have been one of the richest women in India. She was also powerful. Interestingly, we also have a first-person account of what she was really like.
French traveller Captain Modave, who was there in about 9 years after she moved there, tells us that she was a dark-looking, short woman, very pious, very simple, but extremely big eyes. And he was very surprised to see, he went to Maheshwar and he wanted a passage further out, and people said, oh, you go to the river in the morning, the queen comes there for a bath. So he couldn't believe it. He went to the ghats and this lady in white was just walking out of this thing in wet, and he said, okay, that's the queen. And she had no jewelry, she's very simple. So he somehow screwed up the courage to request her, and she said, come down to my Durbar. And the next day she sat there, spoke to him and gave him the necessary documents. And he tells us that she sat there on a gaddi, she did not have parda. Anyone could walk in and request, and she would listen to her subjects, what they wanted and how they wanted help. There are many such stories. Even though she was building everywhere, she also gave money to Muslim fakirs to pray for the welfare of the state. She didn't cut away their money. But there's something else that I would like to add about Ahilyabai, which I find fascinating and nobody else has highlighted it. She was stopped from going sati. Then when her daughter wanted to commit sati, she tried her level best to stop her from taking sati. However, when her son died and when her grandson died, there is no mention of her trying to stop her daughters-in-law or granddaughters-in-law from committing sati.
Clearly, there is a lot more we have to learn about Ahilyabai. Ironically, forget knowing more, we actually come across so little of her in our history books. Sugandha believes this iterates deep biases.
One, she came towards the end of the Maratha period and the beginning of the British, who didn't want to acknowledge. And second, she was a woman who was doing all this. If it was a man, you would have heard a lot more of it. Not many people want to acknowledge that women work independently and women do a very good job. And of course, she was not, when we started looking at our history, we wanted a very virile history. We wanted the men fighting or even the women fighting. You see, the women fighters are more revered than the women builders. So this woman was not really into fighting at all. She was into helping her population. She was into building travelers' inns, stuff that will help the population, which did not fit in with the idea of what they wanted from history. That's the only way I can explain it. Otherwise, she was one of the most remarkable women in the entire world history. Why we don't give her that stature, I don't know.
That is probably true. But Ahilyabai's legacy can be seen in the far corners of India if you go looking for it. But it is here that you will find her spirit, echoing in the ghats and streets of Maheshwar, the city she built and loved. Ahilyabai was a true trailblazer. Thank you so much for joining us this week, and do remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Goodbye.